Hello and welcome to the Sunday Club. Thank you for waiting for us. I see that our viewers have joined us already, and we're really happy to be back. I want to apologize for last week. I was unfortunately traveling. As a result, we didn't have the Sunday Club, but we're back, and we're back with a power-packed panel. First of all, I want to start by wishing you all a very, very happy 75th Independence Day. It's a proud day for us all over the country and a day worth celebrating. And it's wonderful to see the tricolor flying high in the Kashmir Valley as well, and in all four corners of our country. So it's a great day to be with you all. And once again, thank you for joining us. And let's just dive straight into our conversation for this evening. I'm delighted to be joined by a very high-powered panel, Suhel, Seth, Justice Katju, Professor Sengupta from Jammu University, and of course, Abhijit, Iyer-Mitra are all joining us today. And I thought we should just jump right into it and move straight into the Afghanistan situation, which is basically exploding. Can't say many of us did not see that coming. We did see that coming, but there was really not much we could have done about it. And tragically, we're hearing of all kinds of stories coming in. I'm going to dive straight to Abhijit, who has a few contacts in Afghanistan, to give us a brief on what's happening right now as we speak.
Ram Ram Sa Khammagani Hukum. I just wanted to say that, all our prognostications were wrong. Because we've been following this with satellite imagery. We can confirm the Taliban are not using heavy weaponry. They're not using rocket launchers. They're not using artillery. They're not using tanks. They're not using APCs. They've managed to, capture and repurpose one or two tanks. We see a huge number of tanks and artillery on the Afghan side, which surprisingly, what happens is when a fight breaks out, instead of using all these pieces, the fight lasts for something like 20 to 30 minutes and the Afghans just run. The Afghan National Army just runs. I mean, the fight hasn't even been won or lost and they're running after first contact. Now, this was something we just couldn't have figured in. There is no proof of a Pakistani invasion happening. Surprise, surprise. I thought there would be. There isn't. We have seen absolutely no evidence of any kind of material support, at least in heavy artillery and heavy weaponry by the Pakistanis. We're seeing no evidence of air support by the Pakistanis. Morale is such a difficult question to answer. Why is the morale so broken that the moment first contact happens with the Taliban, they're running? The swarming that we've seen, the ability of the Taliban to cut off supply lines and roads, this have been reporting for a very long time. It didn't make a difference for the last 20 years. Advaita, if you remember when we were talking about this last, I was telling you, 20, 30 kilometers, the moment you go outside Herat, it was all Taliban checkpoints there right up to the minaret of Jammu. Mazari Sharif, it took us less than 1 hour to get to the first Taliban checkpoint all the way up to Balkh. Ghor and Ghazni were always in Taliban hands where I met the commanders out there. Kandahar, same thing. I mean, I didn't know if it was government controlled or Taliban controlled was I was there. So what is happening out here is a complete collapse of the morale of the army. Even somebody as seasoned as Abdul Rashid Dostum, who brutal, nasty fellow, even he, we were actually tracking that particular fight that he went to put up in Mazari Sharif. He literally, his troops collapsed and ran. They had tanks, they had artillery, they had armored personnel carriers. They literally stopped firing and ran. You can see light flashes every now and then when a satellite goes over and takes pictures at night. It stops. You see these flashes stop in the space of like 1 to 2 hours maximum, and they're literally, their tanks haven't been captured, their artillery hasn't been captured, they've just abandoned them and run. We don't know what is happening out there. Nobody can gauge the kind of morale collapse that has happened. It isn't, let's be clear, it has not been a military victory of the Taliban. It's been a morale collapse of the Afghan national forces. and complete bloody duplicity by the Americans. Shame on them.
Justice Katju, you've been observing the Afghan situation very carefully, and you've of course written on it as well. What is your perspective on what's happening right now? There are all kinds of, at least on social media, there are a lot of cries for help and assistance, and a lot of condemnation of the Americans. The fact that they did the pullout in this way, and what was the purpose of their presence there at all if this was what it was going to come to. So, Justice, what are your comments on this?
Sir, you're on mute. आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही.
No, he's not on mute actually.
I think I can be heard.
Yeah,
Yes,
we can hear you. We can hear you now.
Now, see, there are two parts. Firstly, Abhijit asked, how did this happen? No, it is very simple to explain. And I don't know why Abhijit, who is supposed to be a great defense analyst, could not understand this. See, please understand, very simple thing.
I deserve
very
that.
simple to understand. Please don't interrupt. Just listen to me. I did not interrupt you. See, Afghans have a long history of not liking foreign troops. Now, the Afghan army, Afghan movement is an indigenous entity. Whereas the Taliban army is an indigenous entity. Whereas this Afghan army was a creation of the Americans after the American invasion of 2001. So they are regarded as puppet troops. No, people of Afghan don't respect puppets. What is this Ashraf Ghani and before him this President Karzai? They were just American puppets. Americans don't, if you have read the history of Afghanistan from the time of Alexander the Great, British were kicked out and Russians were kicked out. They don't like foreign, they are very fiercely independent people. So the Afghan army was nothing but a puppet. They were not respected, and therefore the Taliban conducted guerrilla war. Now guerrilla war can only be conducted if you have support of the people. Now people supported Taliban because it was an indigenous entity. Whereas this Afghan and Ashraf Ghani, they're all puppets. So it's very simple. And they were puppets, they were mercenaries. And when they saw which way the tide was turning, they suddenly disappeared. There was nothing in them. So Taliban has no doubt conquered Afghanistan. But now I want to tell you something important. You see, the test of every activity, political activity or political system is one and only one. And that is, does it raise the standard of living of the people? Now, these Talibans are feudal village idiots. They are brave people, no doubt, brave fighters. But they are Islamic fundamentalists, feudal-minded bigots. They can't solve the problems of poverty, unemployment, malnourishment, healthcare, and so on. So after some time, what they are bound to start off is this nonsense of Islamic fundamentalism, of stoning women to death for adultery, and enforcing burqa, and that a woman can't leave a relative, and chopping off the hands of thieves. All this nonsense is bound to start because they have nothing in them, these Talibans. They can't solve the real problems of Afghanistan, which is poverty, unemployment, and so on. So they are bound to all this. So very bad days, dark days are coming to Afghanistan. They are going to be hurled into the Middle Ages. Thank you.
That's indeed tragic. Suhel, I'm sorry, you wanted to come in.
No, I want to say three things. We are today entering the 75th year of our independence. Any society is known by two things. One is the way it treats human beings, and the second is the way it treats animals. Now, you might think I'm distracting, but I just want to park this thought. The Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, as Justice Katju will bear me out, was set out in 1960. The punishment for cruelty to animals is a measly 50 rupees. That act has not been amended. It has led to the kind of cruelty at the hands of some people in our country to animals who are defenseless and voiceless. I would just like to park this at the Sunday Club because we have very involved and engaged viewers. We need to have a campaign sometime later on how we as a society can amend that act and ensure that our animals are treated in a humane and humanitarian manner. Having parked this, and I think it's an important point that I wanted to park because we were discussing a different kind of animal, which is the Taliban. When America attacked Afghanistan post 9/11, George W. Bush said that we are doing this because of what they have done to us on our soil. The entire engagement was born out of revenge. It wasn't strategic. Then it started to become strategic. The second thing that they were supposed to do was to train Afghan forces. But what happened? There was supremacy of the troops that were from outside, whether it was the United Kingdom, NATO, the US included, all of that. You didn't train these people. Obama, the scoundrel, started this nonsense of a troop pullout, which was also echoed by Trump. But they were smart people. They knew that they could say stupid things but not do stupid things. Joe Biden has said and done stupid things. That's why Afghanistan is in the mess that it is. Third, have you seen India's response on this issue? It is either vacuous or completely missing. We are rearing a monster in our backyard. Please understand, Pakistan's tacit or overt support to the Taliban is not because they love the Taliban. It's the fact that they hate India more. We have done nothing to engage with the Taliban. We have been kept out of all the major talks. Yes, Jaishankar flew to Doha, but that was more optics than reality. We saw the Taliban engage with the Chinese leadership. We then saw the Taliban engage in Qatar, which, by the way, is a pariah within the GCC countries. So, this is the problem that we are facing today. A, zero Indian engagement oblique focus of foreign policy. Two, America is not a superpower, it's a super idiot and a super coward. Number three, I always tell people, elect a Democrat and you will screw America. Every Democrat in a president of America has actually screwed America and has screwed India in the process. We think Democrats are our friends, they are no friends of ours. Biden would be better if he took a bunch of sleeping tablets and slept his way through the presidency. Whenever he's awake, he's a bigger danger to the world than the Taliban is. On that note, I will end my opening remarks by just saying, I'm proud of India, I'm proud of my country, but my country must do something about what's happening to our Afghan neighbors. We cannot be a superpower in the region and then be super weak in our response. Jai Hind, and I wish each one of you a happy independence.
Mutual fan club has been activated. But moving on to
See,
Professor...
if someone praises you, if praises people, you're jealous. This is the problem. We are like Romans.
Professor Sengupta, thank you so
Stop
much.
behaving like Pakistan, Advaita Kala. Your actions must not be
Like
guided by
Pakistan,
jealousy of Suhel or me.
One of our viewers, Pinky, has said that the Pakistan Air Force was actually showering petals on the Taliban today. I don't
Was
know
it?
if that's
I
true,
don't
but
know.
that sounds
Pinky
believable.
may know better.
Professor Sengupta, what do you think is Pakistan's gain apart from the ideological match between the state and Taliban? What is their gain in terms of being such a support base for them?
No, before I come to Pakistan gains, I think I have to let me refer to what Professor Katju said. You see, what he said about the Afghan National Security Forces was the same thing that was said about the communist Afghanistan's army, the one that was trained by the Soviet Union. And yet that particular army, once the Soviets had left in 1988, kept the Mujahideen at bay for full 4 years. It is only when the Soviet Union collapsed and when Najibullah did not have the resources to maintain everything that he started this process of negotiations. And of course, because of very inept human handling, everything went south. The difference between Najibullah and these leaders is Najibullah was rooted in Afghan society. You may say many things about PDPA, the mistakes they made, the horror stories, etc., etc. But Najibullah had his pulse on the Afghan people. I mean, Karzai and Ghani are rootless people planted superficially on Afghan soil.
Yes.
I basically say the Afghan is an olive. An olive tree grows best when amount of water is limited. If you put too much water, the roots get rotten. And that is precisely what happened with the present Afghan government and the Afghan army. You've put so much money without taking into account what is it that motivates them. What is it that motivated the Afghan army to fight once the Soviets had left? How is it? And then you'll figure out why this particular Afghan government has collapsed. You see, there is a Orwellian memory hole. We deliberately, and this is basically done by the Americans, deliberately we have chosen to forget Najibullah. Why have we chosen to forget Najibullah? Why have we basically ensured that nobody remembers that he put up a resistance for 4 years on his own against the Mujahideen?
Yes.
Now, the fact is, the particular society or particular superstructure that the Americans set up and the Americans funded was weak, and as I repeat, it was unrooted. Now, let's come back to Pakistan's so-called gains. Pakistan now knows that it will have a regime that is friendly to them. As to how much control they will exert over this particular regime is another matter. But given the fact that their focus, their basically strategic aims are aimed towards India, any government in Afghanistan that is not pro-Indian and possibly slightly anti-Indian is something that Afghanistan is happy with. And they believe, together with the Chinese, they will get from this particular Afghanistan government whatever they want. And what they want from this Afghan government, in my opinion, is limited. And even if it isn't limited, they will find out what they get from this Afghan government is limited. There are fears that have been raised that the Afghans or the Talib will start making claims on the Pashtun areas of Pakistan. I have a feeling this will not be so, because the Pashtun area in Pakistan, I think, is quite alarmed at what the Taliban has done, and those old irredentist feelings that we talked about when it comes to trans-border Pashtun royalty. I think that will be tested. I think on this score, Pakistan has less to worry about. But by and large, whatever Pakistan needs, given its very narrow strategic vision, Pakistan has got.
Abhijit, you were agreeing with Professor Sengupta. Do you want to come in?
No, I have nothing to add. I agree 100% with what he said. The fact remains that we knew right from the beginning that the Afghans never respected Karzai. Karzai is he's like that fellow Ahmed Chalabi. Ahmed Chalabi was that clown who was foisted as being the great liberator of Iraq by the Americans when they invaded Iraq. Right? The bugger was a petrol pump owner in Jordan. एक petrol pump चलाने वाले को they wanted to foist as president of Iraq. Of course, he got exposed very early on, so they couldn't make him squat in Iraq. The problem is people like Ghani and Karzai are no different. It's Ghani is an international organizations person. So it's like saying Shashi Tharoor has his pulse on his hand on the pulse of the Indian nation, or Arundhati Roy has her hand on the pulse of the nation. Can you imagine what will happen to India if you make Arundhati Roy president of India, prime minister of India? It's the same thing. They put circus chimpanzees as presidents. Karzai was corrupt through and through right from the beginning. Now Ghani lived off a bureaucratic salary at the UN, where suddenly out of the blue does his nephew Sultan Ghani living in Dubai have money for a Gulfstream G5 that costs, if you exercise all options, it comes to between $85 to $90 million. And he's actually putting up pictures of him leaving Kabul on it a few days back. These are the kind of jokers, and it was so rotten and so corrupt. It's just impossible to believe. I have seen these people. I have known a lot of these people, so-called high government officials, when they used to come to Australia. When I was a student out there before this entire invasion started, and they used to come and give talks they used to beg to come give talks at our university. They had to take taxis. Today they drive around in Rolls Royce and Maybachs. Where do you think those Rolls Royce and Maybachs have come? It's come from the American taxpayer's pocket. And mind you, even to get Ghani elected, you had to rig the bloody election.
Yes.
Whereas somebody who had their foot on the ground like Abdullah, you didn't want to allow them to become president even. So you've allowed, and then there was these circle jerk types in DC. That DC policy circle jerk circuit, what I call the Bukake circle jerk of DC, they are the worst kind of jokers you will ever come across. Everyone, they will never contradict each other. It's all about scratching each other's back and validating each other's hollow scholarship, so-called quote-unquote scholarship, which counts for nothing. So every one of them, tell me one person, except maybe say Christine Fair, who wanted to bomb Pakistan right from the beginning. Tell me one person who did not advocate moderation with Pakistan. So you were constantly dealing with the symptom and not the cause. It's like, getting jaundice and going to a doctor, and the doctor, instead of giving you jaundice medication, gives you a Chanel or Yves Saint Laurent ka foundation, saying, "Beta, tumhara chehra thoda pila pila ho raha hai. Thoda ye foundation number 5 laga lo." That was what was happening out there. So there was multiple failures across the board out there. To be fair, I still thought, because I have met a lot of Afghan forces going around Afghanistan, I found them personally to be quite motivated. Though the very fact that the best hash you could only get from the Afghan army should have told me something. When you want the best hash to smoke in Afghanistan, you go to the Afghan army base or the police base and get it from there. So that maybe should have been a warning sign, but I also ignored that because they spoke very well. They seemed motivated. They were winning fights in 2018. They managed to reverse certain things. This collapse, we simply couldn't. All the statistical indicators, and this is where this goes back to Robert McNamara and the Vietnam War. As per the statistics, he was winning. So the joke was, going by the statistics, it was American troops that should have been in Ho Chi Minh City. But going by the reality, it was North Vietnamese troops outside Saigon. I think that's what happened. We fell into a statistical fallacy.
Very briefly, can I come in?
Of course.
Sure. And then Justice Katju after you.
Yeah. See, such was their corruption that the Taliban, who only had a base with the Pashtuns, were able to recruit Tajiks, were able to recruit people from other ethnicities, number one. And of course, Iran ensured that the Taliban was also able to recruit Shias and had Shia commanders. But all this is possible when there is tremendous corruption on the ground and the arbitrariness of the warlords continued. In many provinces, the warlords did whatever they wanted, abducted whatever they wanted, and this thing they have called bachabazi, it went on. Under those circumstances, for a lot of Afghan civilians, what then is the difference between a corrupt Afghan regime sitting in Afghanistan and the Taliban? Because socially, you see, Afghan life, at least in the villages, carries on as it has before. So there was no difference between the Taliban and the Afghan government when it came to a lot of things. And therefore, if there was no mass resistance against the Taliban, then I think only the Afghan government and the Americans are to blame.
Justice Katju, please. Yes.
See, I don't at all agree with Professor Sengupta. I think he's totally wrong. And let me present my point of view. See, the motivation for the Taliban was Islam was the motivation, not money. Whereas the motivation for the Afghan army was money. It was a mercenary army. They were getting salaries, and in a country with huge unemployment, army is a good area. Just as in Vietnam, the Viet Cong were not fighting for money. They were fighting for liberation of the country. Whereas the South Vietnamese army was a mercenary army because they were getting salaries. So please don't mix up. Don't say that Taliban and Afghan army is same. The motivation is totally different. For Taliban, it is Islam. You may like it or dislike it, but this is the truth. So please stick to the truth. It was not. Secondly, it was said that nothing will happen in the northwest frontier province of Pakistan. Pakistan has 4 provinces, and the northwest province, which was formerly known as Northwest Frontier Province and now known as Seth, that is 75% Pashto speaking. And people there have very strong ties with the Afghan Pashto. And Pashto is the main language in Afghanistan. Of course, only about 45%, but they have very strong cultural ties. The Afghan Pashtos and the Pakistan Pashtos. And now that the Taliban has taken over Afghanistan, I can tell you that in some way or the other will come into this northwest frontier province. If not by elections, some other way, the Pakistani army will fight with them, but then the Talibanis will resort again to guerrilla war, as they did in Afghanistan, and guerrillas fight with support which they have, and they fight with, guerrilla war is fought by snatching the weapons of the enemy. They will do that. So whole of Pakistan will become disturbed now. Apart from for the other 3 provinces in Pakistan also have a lot of fanatics, Tehreek-e-Labaik and all. Their sympathies are with Taliban. So whole of Pakistan is going to get disturbed. Please don't, because Pakistan is the ideology was Islam, and 95% people are Muslim, and of these, leave aside the few liberals and the so-called educated people. Otherwise, the masses are bigger. It comes to blasphemy. They will kill people just on allegation of blasphemy, not even proof. If there's an allegation of blasphemy against you, you will be killed. Your lawyer will be killed. Thirdly, I don't agree with Suhel with respect. I say hands of government policy must be keep away, for God's sake, from Afghanistan. You will be creating the same bigger difficulty. At least America was a superpower. What are you? To Trump too, you have nothing, and you are going to enter or interfere with Afghanistan. The superpower could not do it. Please, for God's sake, hands off, keep away, use your common sense. Interfering with Afghan affairs is going to create big problems for you. Thank you.
No, 1 minute. Never did I say interfere with the Taliban. You know, my English is pretty good. What I said was, at the table of negotiation, India was left out. Whether that negotiating table would be tantamount to interference is for the jury to decide, which is out right now. I have not for a moment said that we should interfere or we should send troops. We can barely send troops to Bengal to manage the killings of Hindus post the Bengal election. हम लोग घंटा करेंगे Afghanistan. So that was not my point. So Justice Katju, with due respect, you have misquoted and misunderstood. Second point, I've always maintained that America is a selfish country. America is for America. For America or other people to believe that America is for the world, you have seen it time and again. I don't know why we are reinventing the wheel. We should have never had these expectations from the Americans. The Americans are catering to a domestic target market. They want the average American McDonald's eating idiot to believe that, oh, we're saving money, we got back our troops, we're saving money, go out and have that beef burger. So that's the Americans for you. So let's understand how America behaves. Third point, which is very, very important. You may not want to engage with the Taliban. But Pakistan will continue to stoke the fires so that Taliban then becomes a rash, and from rash becomes eczema, and from eczema becomes cancer. Do you really want to wait till that time? I don't think so. I'm not S. Jaishankar. Abhijit is an expert. You're a former Supreme Court judge. Not that that helps. Professor Sengupta is a professor. Advaita Kala is an anchor with decent audio today. Y'all are the experts. Point I'm making is I'm only giving you commonsensical stuff that I genuinely believe that if we completely wash our hands off, the problem isn't going to go away. So either have a solution for the problem or at least tell people what you want to do. As simple as that.
Yeah. Can I just come in here quickly? Okay. So just to add, I think between Professor Sengupta and Justice Katju, I would tend to agree more with Professor Sengupta from what I saw in the ground. The complaint wasn't so much about foreign forces. It was more about the rapaciousness, the cluelessness, and the third-ratedness of the people ruling out there. Nobody I met, literally nobody I met had any respect for gun. Nobody I met had any respect for Karzai. On the other hand, very surprisingly, I would see cars go around in rural Afghanistan with Najibullah's photo stuck on the back of the car. Okay, imagine now if Najibullah was seen as a foreign puppet, why would they put up his photo on the car, especially driving through Taliban territory? And the Taliban did not have issues with that. Okay, I've seen one or two of those cars in Kandahar, which, like I said, I never knew if it was under Taliban control or under government control because the government could do squat. I had to be evacuated from that city because there was talk of an Indian, and I thought I was like, going to be kidnapped or whatever. But we need to be very careful out here in seeing that the Taliban itself, there is no particular classification of the Taliban. They are just rural goat herding country bumpkins who could have been fighting for the army or fighting against the army. The problem was that the army was so badly mismanaged, so ill-treating, now we know ill-treating their forces or skimming away this thing, that they had no intent of fighting for the army. I spoke to 2 or 3 Taliban fighters who had been in the army at one point of time and they left simply because they hadn't been paid. They joined the army because they thought they would get, regular rations and regular pay and all of that. 3-4 of them had never been paid. And so after like 4 or 5 months of waiting for their pay, they just quit. So we need to make a difference between this sort of national feeling and the mismanagement. And out there, I have to say, I always found that tribal feelings trumped national feelings. Like the Taliban commander in Ghor didn't know what was happening outside Ghor. He didn't care what was happening outside Ghor. Same in Ghazni. The local commander didn't seem to care what was happening outside Ghazni. In Samagan province, the exact same thing. And in Samagan, I didn't meet the top commander. I met all the lower bumpkins. They didn't even know what was happening outside their own valley. You forget district. They didn't even know what was happening outside the valley. They didn't care. And, I didn't feel any of the xenophobia against the Americans or anything that in Kandahar, yes, there was. There was definitely a significant anti-American feeling out there, anti-foreigner, just general xenophobia, even against Indians. But I did not feel that anywhere else. Now, you may say this is anecdotal based on my personal interactions out there, but see, it's a pattern. One is an anecdote. When the same thing keeps repeating all over with one significant exception being Kandahar, then it is a nationwide pattern. So I would say that Professor Sengupta is actually quite accurate in his assessment. It has a lot more to do with complete compounded governmental incompetence and failure and being clueless little socialites. Literally, it's like having Arundhati Roy as Prime Minister of India.
May I just 1 minute interruption? See, in fact, Abhijit has proved my point. he has said that the Afghan soldier did not get salary, so he went over to Tal. See, they had no motivation except getting income because they were unemployed people. To join the army, at least you can fill your stomach. Whereas Taliban is not fighting for money. They have religious motivation. They are Islamic fanatics. That if they die, all this nonsense. I don't believe in it, but that is the motivation. They are not Taliban were not fighting for money. Just as the Viet Cong in South Vietnam were not fighting for money, unlike the Army Republic of Vietnam, who were just mercenaries. Please try to understand. You have yourself proved my point, Abhijit, and yet you are saying that you agree with Professor Sengupta.
But sir, it is different.
You have
I would
what was the motivation? The motivation was money for the Afghan, whereas for Taliban it was Islam. Religion was
actually,
their
sir,
motivation.
it wasn't. It wasn't actually religion, sir. It had more to do with the fact that many of them had personal gripes with the local governor. I met people who the governor's personal bodyguard had raped their sisters or their mothers or things like that, or shot their brothers and things like that. It had a lot, there was very little religion to do out there. The second thing was, even when you talk religion, if you go by the strict Salafi interpretation, these people are heretics, and I'll tell you why. Because they believe in a law called Pashtun Wali, which is much harsher and stricter than Sharia. So if you actually talk to Afghan women, they see Sharia as a liberation compared to how rotten Pashtun Wali is, which is very problematic. So in fact, they are not religiously motivated. They will all use the idiom of Islam. You know, if you go even to Syria and Lebanon and see, I've been in Lebanon when it was getting bombed and things like that. When a bomb falls, they'll say Allahu Akbar. That doesn't mean it's a Muslim war. It's just an expression saying, Ayo Rama, or when something falls, when you cook the dal in the pressure cooker and it falls, you're like, Ayo Shiva Shiva, what happened? I dropped my tuvar dal. How am I going to eat sambar? That doesn't mean I'm putting a Sanghi religious connotation to my tuvar ka dal. Na? So there is a big difference between that motivation, which came much more out of the rapaciousness of local warlords and governors and the lack of the state monopoly on violence. It really is not religious in that sense. I know it doesn't sound right being the Taliban and all of that, because the moment you see a man in a turban and a beard, you just assume he's a religious fanatic. He probably is, but his own traditional way of life, which is much more regressive, is more important to him than
Let us
Islam.
agree to disagree.
One minute. I have some very heartbreaking news.
Let us agree to disagree.
I have heartbreaking
Let us
news to
agree
give
to
you.
disagree.
Kabul has fallen. The Taliban has just made an announcement that they will take over Afghanistan formally in the next 48 hours. Kabul has fallen. The world has been defeated, not Afghanistan. Superpowers have today shown themselves to be super cowards. Superpowers have yielded to a bunch of rogue, fanatic scoundrels. And this price will not be paid only by innocent Afghans, it will be paid by everyone, including us in the subcontinent. Mark my words. This is a sad, sad day in global history, and we are seeing it unfurl. You talked about genocide. This is going to be much worse and much more unimaginable. We have let the Afghan people down. It's not about the Afghan army or about the Taliban. It's a sad, sad day for global diplomacy and global powers.
It is indeed tragic, really tragic. My final question on this topic is, what does this mean for India, and should India have any kind of intervention? And I'd like to start with Abhijit. There was recent news that the New York Times had requested the Indian government to rescue some of their reporters from Afghanistan. So, there's already this sort of situation where the Indian government is being turned to for this kind of help. So could you just speak a little bit on what our role will be? Will we have a role? Will we not have a role?
We will have exactly zero role. First, just to answer the question of New York Times, jai wo bhaad mein, I don't give a damn about them. Tomorrow, if they land up dead in a gutter, good riddance to bad rubbish. That's number one. Number two, India will have no role in the coming future. Let us see. The problem with governments like this is they tend to get too hubristic, and they will invariably carry out some big attack somewhere that will bring about something. It will bring about something or the other. Remember, they're behaving themselves now. Give them 6 to 8 months in power and see where the hubris settles. There will either be something with Iran or there will be something in Pakistan. Because remember, even the Pakistani elites live in a state of perpetual siege in Islamabad. My friends who come visiting here, they're always amazed at how lax our five-star hotel security is. They're like, bhai, the fellows putting mirrors under the cars, they're not even looking at the mirrors. They're just taking it around the cars because somebody's watching them on the CCTV camera to do that. They open up the trunks and the hoods of the car. They don't even know. Even if I planted 100 tons of Semtex or TNT out there, they won't even know what they're looking for out there. Those Labradors have never been trained in bomb sniffing. They wouldn't have sniffed anything other than a mutton bone, or if it's a vegetarian dog, then maybe paneer and dahi in its entire life. Right? Apparently, in Islamabad, these checks are extremely thorough. So they have, and in private, they will always admit that they miscalculated, and now they've gone in so far, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to pull back. And they've added another nuisance on their heads. I want to reiterate, this is not a Pakistani invasion happening. I was believing all that was said. None of the satellite imagery seems to prove a Pakistani invasion happening. This is a collapse of the Afghan government. So what is going to happen is this is most likely because, like I told you over and over again, there wasn't a single Taliban commander I met who had anything but contempt and hatred for Pakistan. This is going to refract back onto Pakistan. But before that, remember, whatever few people are under the control of the Pakistani government and the ISI, we need to start focusing on Kashmir right now. 3 days back, you had rocket-propelled grenades that were seized after a very, very long time. And remember, 1989, it is when the Soviets withdrew that the Kashmir insurgency started up. Today, 3 days back, you've recovered rocket-propelled grenades. That's a very, very serious escalation. That kind of weaponry is not provided to terrorists coming across the thing. So if that is being given, we probably need to be prepared for a huge, huge, huge escalation in Kashmir. Personally, what I would rather have seen was for us to play off this siloization between the Taliban factions. It's too late. We can't do it anymore. But if we can, let's try to create some kind of a civil war out there between the Taliban.
Yes, like we discussed last time around, the Taliban is not a monolith, which is kind of the common understanding as far as they're concerned. Professor Sengupta, same question to you. Before we move on to the next topic.
Look, the last time the Taliban did something stupid, and the something stupid was giving shelter to Osama bin Laden. It ended in disaster for them. I have a feeling that the Taliban probably recognizes this, and even if they don't, their backers, China and Pakistan, do recognize this. And let us face it, their backers are just not China and Pakistan, they also happen to be Iran, Russia, and there is no doubt the United States as well. See, this has been arranged. This takeover, in a sense, has been arranged. The Afghan army were told specifically, we are given to understand, not to fight. So with so many people actually backing the Taliban, it is quite likely that the Taliban will not make the mistakes of hurting who their backers are, who at this point in time happen to be practically everybody. And even in Doha, I think we made our points very clear to the Taliban that, we expect our interests not to be hurt. Now, as to how that plays out, we don't know, because I am not too sure the Taliban also will be in full control over whatever happens, whatever goes on. So my thing is that act of hubris that led to 9/11 in 2001 is not going to happen now. But these things are incident driven. something may happen somewhere. Some massacre of Shias may happen somewhere, which makes Iran angry, and then there go the Shia commanders. Then right now, Dostam is licking his wounds, probably taken refuge in Afghanistan, in Uzbekistan. He will come back to his own province. He will come back to his own province. I don't think the Talib will be able to take up conquer Panjshir yet. So the remnants of the Northern Alliance will hold out in Panjshir. So the complete takeover of Afghanistan, I think right now is not likely to happen. These pockets of resistance will remain, and as and when, how the Talib behaves, we'll have to recalibrate our behavior. The fact remains that our options right now in Afghanistan are fairly limited, as was pointed by Abhijit. There isn't much we can do, and there was not much we could do earlier either, because whatever we did was neutralized by the cynicism or the stupidity of the Americans. So under those circumstances, I think we have to wait and watch. When it comes to Kashmir, by the way, right now I am in Srinagar. I'm talking from Srinagar. The intelligence grid in Srinagar seems to be working very well. If anything happens, the security forces come to know of it. Neutralization takes place very, very fast. But yes, somebody with an AK-47, no doubt about it. And that can get serious. My thing is, right now, the security forces control the situation on the ground very well. The control is near absolute. So right now, I would say we should be on the lookout, but not overtly fearful as to what can happen in the valleys.
Thank you so much for that brilliant intervention, Professor Sengupta. I just want to say this is your first appearance on the Sunday Club, and our viewers are really appreciating your intervention. So I hope you will come back and join us many, many times. Thank you so much. And of course, please like, share, subscribe, everybody. I have to put that in there. And we'll move on to our next topic. As we know, the Prime Minister yesterday announced that the 14th of August going forward will be Partition Horrors Remembrance Day. It was an attempt at basically reconciliation and a little bit of truth-telling to acknowledge these divisions of the past that much bloodshed and hopefully carve out a path for healing. Now, that was the intent behind the Prime Minister's announcement. However, like in everything, there was a political reaction to it. It was, I might add, very well received by most people. However, politics intervened, as it usually does, and the opposition had a few choice things to say about this and some finger pointing. I'm going to really just read out Shashi Tharoor's comments on this. He tweeted today, "One thing you learn from history is that you can learn the wrong lessons from history. This Partition Horrors Remembrance Day is an example of this, using the past to sow hatred in the minds of ordinary people in the present, pitting Hindus versus Muslims for base political moves. If you were to have a Partition Horrors Remembrance Day for every day that the ruling party sows seeds of partition within our minds, we'll have horrors all 365 days of the year. Let us promote amity and unity instead in our daily lives and our political discourse." So those were his comments, pretty much along the lines of what critics and opponents are saying. And I'm going to start with Suhel here. I just want to add also that actually, I don't think he shared this, but I'll go ahead and share it. He did, there's a partition museum in Amritsar, and Suhel has actually donated something like 50 lakhs to it, although I'm not sure if it's public knowledge. So I think Suhel is somebody that we can start with, since he's quite invested in this particular strand of history.
Just like BJP gets everything wrong, they've even got the nomenclature of this wrong. You needn't have added the word horrors. It should just have been Partition Remembrance Day. Horrors automatically is negative, it is untrusted, and it suggests violence, it suggests ignominy, it suggests something that's gone completely wrong. I genuinely believe that the partition of India must be remembered for the courage of the people, the conviction of the people, and most importantly, the sacrifice of the people who left whatever they had made in their lives cross borders. And the pain was on both sides of the border. The pain was as much as people who went from India to Pakistan and the other way around. So I don't believe that we should completely obliterate history. That's not the intent. I that contribution to the Partition Museum. I remember the late Arun Jaitley, a very good friend of mine, telling me, why do we remember these things? To which I told him, I said, A, history cannot be forgotten or obliterated. Just because you choose to ignore it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Number two, for me, and this is evident in the Partition Museum in Amritsar, and these are tales of courage. It's also about human resilience. It's about how people who lost everything in life then began to recover and began to rebuild their lives and became role models and inspirational people, many of them, many in Indian industry. So, I don't think the BJP did any service to themselves by introducing the word horrors. That I tend to agree with Shashi. Horrors seems to suggest that, we have someone to blame. The only people we had to blame at that point in time was the leadership of the Indian side, which was Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru, if at all, or Cyril Ratcliffe and Louis Mountbatten on the British side. But to blame, each other and then create this divide again is so unnecessary. Because what people, the trolls and the lumpen elements of both sides will now pick up the word horrors and then stoke violence, incite people, and rub salt in people's festering wounds, which is so unnecessary in a country that has entered its 75th year of independence. Sometimes, Advaita, I feel Narendra Modi should tell people, if he does want to, and I hope he does one day, that beyond nationalism, there is something called humanism. Celebrate that. Always talking about nationalism, jingoism, this, right wing, it's unnecessary. Because you can't divide a country which is so young in its political course as a democracy and then hope for it to succeed. I mean, you're inviting failure, you're inviting a disaster. And I agree with Shashi. I mean, this, to my mind, he's absolutely right. And they've played into the hands of the opposition. Because now the opposition will take every incident that's happened between Hindus and Muslims and play it up. Which, again, they are also not doing any great service to themselves. But they are equally irresponsible. Yes. But why play this card? I've not understood.
Yes.
Right. So I think the partition was horrific. So I really don't maybe it's the verbiage could have been different, like you pointed out, but I really don't see how else one can remember it. And certainly, even when you discuss the International Day of Commemoration of the Victims and the memory of the victims of the Holocaust term itself encompasses what happened during that terrible time in history. But unfortunately, partition does not truly represent the kind of horrors that visited people who were living in that time and making that mass the largest movement of human beings from one side to the other, or the exodus, so to speak. So I think partition is an inadequate word. Happened. Professor Sengupta, how do you feel about this particular move by the government? I'm afraid Professor Sengupta isn't here. I'll go to Justice Katju with the same question. Justice, how do you feel about this new sort of commemoration day?
See, everybody knows about the horrors of partition. If you read the short stories of Manto, who was perhaps the greatest short story writer of the Indian subcontinent, you will read don't go about the horror. But I want to go a little deeper. Why was partition done at all? Please, you give me a little time to explain this, because I have to go into economics. See, politics is concentrated economics. So if you want to understand why partition of India was done by the British at all, see, the cost of labor is a big portion of the total cost of production. Labor is less, then the cost of production is less. And if the cost of production is less, you can sell your goods at a cheaper price and undersell your business rival. Now, one businessman eliminates another businessman not with bombs or guns or tanks, but by underselling him, selling the same high quality good but at a cheaper price. That happens also on the national and international level. For example, I'll give you one example. China 49. Before that, China was a very, very poor country. But after 1949, the leaders who came to power built up a massive industrial base in China. Now, that massive industrial base, coupled with the cheap labor available in China, Chinese to undersell the whole world in consumer goods. If you go to Western supermarkets, you will find them packed with Chinese goods because the Chinese will sell them at half the price at which the American manufacturer will sell because the American labor is expensive. Now, once a country sets up a massive industrial base, then everything turns on the cost of labor. A country which has cheap labor has a distinct advantage over countries which have expensive labor. Now, Indian labor is even cheaper than Chinese labor. If we set up of which we have all the potential, we have huge number of engineers and natural resources and so on. But if we set up a massive industrial base, then we will undersell the West. The industries of the West will collapse. They can't face our competition, high quality good at 1/3 the price. So how do they prevent that? Because they will not permit the industries collapsing and millions of their young people getting unemployed. How do they prevent it? They prevent by making Indians fight by doing partition, fight each other, by making people fight each other in the name of caste and creed and so on. See, this is the method of the developed countries. There is a secret unwritten rule in the developed countries. India must not be allowed to become a developed country. Then with its cheap labor, it will undersell the whole world. Industries of even the Chinese who will buy their goods. We will sell at a cheaper price. So please understand why was partition done. The whole game was that India emerged as a modern industrial giant, like another China, of which it has all the potential. We have thousands of engineers. Our engineers are manning Silicon Valley. I go to America very often, and in the American universities, I find Indian professors, science, engineering, medicine, and so on. We have got a huge pool of technical talent and huge natural resources. Within 20 years, we can become like America. But if we do, then will the industries of the developed countries survive? No, they will not survive because we have cheap labor. As I told you, please understand the economics of it. If you want to understand why was partition done, you have to go deeper. Don't be satisfied with superficial analysis. Most of you, I'm sorry to say, just are satisfied with Hindu, Muslim. This is all superficial. The real thing was that developed countries will not allow India to become a highly industrialized country. And for that, they will make us fight each other in the name of religion, caste. That is the reason why partition was done. And the horrors of partition, whenever partition is done, naturally, people get mad. Propaganda was done that Hindus are all evil people, and Hindus were told that Muslims are all evil. They were brainwashed, just like the rule. So propaganda is such a powerful thing, you can brainwash people. But the real purpose of partition was India must not be allowed to become a modern industrial giant. This is still a secret among the developed countries. They will never tell you that. They will not openly say it. But you can gather it by circumstantial evidence, by using your common sense, your head, if you have one. This is all that I have to say.
Oh yes, Professor Sengupta.
Before I come back to the point, partition horrors day, let me say, if any country has kept India back, especially after independence, it has been India itself. We cannot 75 years after independence say that this country or that country has kept us back. It is our policies, it is our foolishness that has kept us back. Now let us come back to partition horrors. I welcome this. This is something that I think we have to face with. We study history. Sometimes we have this tendency to, ignore certain facets of history which are not uncomfortable, and it comes to rebound on us in strange, different ways, in ways we could not imagine. Look, when we talk about the horrors of partition, it is possible, it is likely, and it will be that most communities will be embarrassed by what they did. They will also be outraged by what happened to them. It's a process that goes both ways. And if we are honest, we will have a stock taking. We will know that when you start to balkanize countries, the neighbors who belong to different religions, belong to different ethnicities, perhaps speak different languages, start looking at each other like enemies, and sometimes do fall at each other's throats. You cannot hope for a velvet divorce as it has happened in Czechoslovakia. More often than not, what you get is something like Yugoslavia, or for that matter, Rwanda, and the example closer at home, India. So when you let forth this vociferous forces, and the forces of division start using atavistic, primordial feelings to mobilize opinion, the only consequence can be mindless violence, orgies of violence. Why do I say this? Because I am a son of a person who was a partition victim. Now, he basically came over. He could never say the word independence. My father always talked about partition. He could not say Bangladesh. He always said East Pakistan. But try as I might, I would not, he would not tell me what happened. As to what happened, I gathered from one of my aunts. And the story was one that saddened me more than infuriated me. And I imagine that would have been the story that that Muslims who went over to Bangladesh or to Punjab would also relate. We need to do stock taking. See, what's happened is the following. If you read history nowadays, you look at Wikipedia entries, you end up believing, or you end up getting the impression that, that if partition at all occurred, it was only the Congress that was responsible. And if violence at all occurred, it was only the Hindus and the Sikhs who initiated violence. This is foolish. It cannot happen. We know violence is something that is initiated by so many people, and it goes so many ways. Look at the stories, the current stories that are peddled about the Great Calcutta killing, the Direct Action Day. It's a scam. And therefore, it is extremely important that these things should be remembered, recorded, debated upon. Most importantly, the events and the processes that gave rise to this particular violence, they should not be repeated. And hence, I think a Partition Horrors Day is called for. Now, how will it turn out? You see, there are so many people who will contribute to this story making, this storytelling. I think it is impossible for any side to dominate and ensure that his version gets say. I think every section, every community will have their say, and I have no doubt we will come off better from this exchange than people suspect we will.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think if we have to move on the path of reparation and reconciliation, then there has to be a stock taking and acknowledgement, and really just for all practical reasons, a remembrance of history and just what to the lives of people, and the trauma that exists. I mean, I'm very moved by, what you said about your father, because it's just impossible to believe, to lose everything, to lose your home, to lose your memories, to lose your roots in such an unforeseen and violent way. So I think this day is important, and I do hope that it is commemorated in the right spirit and not hijacked by interests that want to create further divisions, as some are feeling worried about, or for any other reason. And that's really all for today's Sunday Club. I want to thank you all for joining us. Once again, I'm going to ask you to please like, share, and subscribe so you can keep up with our discussions and are notified when we go live. I want to thank my guests for joining us, our regular Sunday clubbers, Suhel, Seth, and Abhijit Iyer-Mitra, as well as Professor Sengupta on his maiden or his debut Sunday club. And I'm going to get him back again, of course. I hope you enjoyed it, Professor.
Oh, very much so.
Okay, I'm so glad to hear that. That means you'll come back.
Definitely. Give me half a chance.
All right, lovely. And of course, as always, Justice Katju, thank you for sparing the time and sharing your views with us. We always look forward to having you here and as opposing counsel mostly, but it still invigorates the debate. So thank you, everybody, and see you soon next Sunday on the next Sunday Club. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.